Welcome to Health Club with Julia. I'm your host, health coach, and registered dietitian, Julia Campagna. I'm on a mission to bridge the gap between looking your best and living your life to the fullest. After years of over dieting, struggling with disordered eating, and destroying my social life, I finally found how to reach my dream physique without sacrificing the things I love. Now I'm sharing all my strategies and education with you. We'll be talking all things health, including hormones, metabolism, and lifestyle to help you cut out the confusion and start living. So get cozy and join the club. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. As always, I'm so happy you are here. I'm going to be talking all about cortisol today. Cortisol, I feel like, is all the rage nowadays. I don't know if it's because I obviously follow like health accounts and I'm in the health wellness space, and so I see it all over the place, or if you guys see that as well, but I feel like it's everywhere. You see a lot of this like cortisol face situation going on. I think more so on TikTok. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok that much, but I do see it on TikTok a bit where like people are saying that they're puffy and inflamed in their face and they're blaming it on the cortisol, and it's everywhere. I feel like this is a big rage, and my thoughts on it is that yes, too much or too little cortisol can be an issue. Does everybody have an issue with cortisol? Probably not. You probably just need to work on your habits and become a healthier person, and you wouldn't have all these issues. Like that includes the whole like cortisol face situation where your face is puffier and more inflamed and all that jazz. That could be for several different reasons. It does not mean that you have cortisol face, quote unquote. That could be that you are just inflamed with other things. You have poor gut health. Maybe you need to just lose some weight, and obviously lower body fat will show a slimmer face. There's a lot of different things, so I don't know. I'm up in the air about this whole cortisol thing, but that's why I want to talk about it. I want to talk about cortisol today and what to look out for, signs, symptoms, causes, what you can do about it if you do find that you do have a lot of these symptoms. Because again, cortisol is being blamed for inflammation, it's being blamed for weight loss resistance, and yes, if you do have an issue with cortisol, it can cause inflammation, it can cause resistance to weight loss. But remember and keep in mind that we do need cortisol. I think people are really demonizing cortisol, but we do need that. Our body naturally produces cortisol, and we need some cortisol. This is our stress response. This is what helps us get out of stressful situations. This is also what helps us get out of bed in the morning. We need cortisol more in the morning. This is called our cortisol awakening response to get us up, to get us active, to get us feeling energized to take on the day. So we need cortisol for certain things. It's just when you have chronic high levels of cortisol that can lead to disruptions and negative effects that you feel. And this can lead to adrenal issues. But again, disclaimer, we do need cortisol. Please remember that. Please don't think that cortisol is like the boogeyman and you need to clear all of it, because no, we need some cortisol here. If you have very severe low levels of cortisol, you will be feeling it. So remember, we need it. But I feel like this one's going to be a quick one. I just want to kind of go over causes of cortisol issues, symptoms that you might experience, and what you can do about it. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's just dive right in. So what can be causes of cortisol issues? Number one, high stress for too long, aka chronic stress. And remember, stress is necessary. We need some stress. We need to have a stress response. It's the key here is high stress for too long. That's the key. For too long. When you are chronically stressed over a long period of time, then you can run into some issues with cortisol, with your adrenal glands, and then that whole kind of spiral happens. But we need stress, but if you have high stress for too long, that can be a cause of cortisol issues. If you have impaired sleep, that can be a trigger for cortisol issues as well. We need our sleep. We know this. This is very important for more than one reason, more than two reasons, more than three reasons. Sleep is very, very important. But we do need to get our sleep. We need at least, I would say, 7.5 hours absolute minimum every single night to not have issues with cortisol. So part of cortisol and cortisol issues and what relates to this is our circadian rhythm. This plays a role in cortisol, and if your circadian rhythm is all off in all sorts of ways, it can throw off cortisol. And there's other ways that sleep can disturb cortisol, but think of it as, circadian rhythm. We have natural sleep-wake cycles, and if you're not honoring that, if you're not getting great sleep, that can disrupt those cycles and disrupt your cortisol. We also know that excessive caffeine intake can cause cortisol issues as well. So caffeine is a stimulant. It can raise our cortisol levels. It can increase our stress levels. So obviously caffeine is not a demon either. Caffeine is fine in moderate amounts. You can have coffee and be totally fine, but when you abuse coffee, that's when you run into issues. So if you are having like 2-3 glasses of coffee every single solitary day, or if you're somebody who has coffee and then an energy drink later in the day, and you're just abusing caffeine, you're having caffeine all the time, you're more at risk of having cortisol issues. Also, if you feel like you rely on coffee, that could be a sign that you have some adrenal issues going on, you have some cortisol issues going on. So if you feel like you need caffeine to get up and get awake and get moving for the day, if you need caffeine for your midday slump, if you need caffeine or you get headaches and every time you withdraw you feel sick, those are really big red flags, and we need to address those now before they get worse. So your body does not need to run off of caffeine. We just naturally do, because our whole society is just overstimulated and runs on caffeine. Literally, America runs on Dunkin' or whatever it is. That's not a great saying when you really think about it. We do not need to run on caffeine. We do not need to run on coffee. We just become reliant on it, and it's because of changes of cortisol, I assume. And so, yeah, if you're relying on caffeine, if you're having really high excess amounts of caffeine, that can be a cause for cortisol issues. And then also, obviously, if you have a poor diet relates back to everything. Nutrition is healing, and if you have really shitty nutrition, you're gonna have a really shitty outcome with your health. And so if you have a really poor diet, that can also cause issues with cortisol as well. So those are some causes of cortisol, biggest one being the chronic stress. There's other things as well, but these are a few that are bigger, more dominant causes that you might experience. Now, symptoms. How do we know if we are having issues with cortisol? Number one, probably the biggest thing that you will feel is extreme fatigue. And I'm not talking like, oh, it's 3 p.m., I wish I could take a nap, I'm tired. It's like, I can't get out of bed, I want to take a nap every second of every day, I need to lay down at 3 p.m. and I can't move, I cannot function, I am that tired. That's what I mean by extreme fatigue. If you have extreme fatigue, that's a really, really big sign that something's going on with your adrenal glands and your cortisol. So definitely get checked out, hopefully before you reach the extreme stage of that. But if you feel really tired and it's not your norm, I would suggest getting that checked as soon as you feel those changes in your fatigue. Another symptom that you might experience is muscle weakness. You might go into the gym and you might be like, okay, let's do my lift. And you start your lift and number one, everything feels super, super heavy and you can't make it through a workout. These are some symptoms related to cortisol issues as well. So again, some weeks with lifting might feel harder than others, and that's relatively normal to experience highs and lows with your energy and your performance in the gym. But if you are constantly struggling with lifting more weight and you just feel like everything's heavy and you can't make it through a lift, that's different. If you just feel really, really weak internally, muscle-wise, these can be symptoms of cortisol issues. If you have a loss of appetite, excuse me. If you have a loss of appetite, this could also be a sign of cortisol issues. If you have high cravings, especially salty foods. So, fun fact, cortisol issues, we actually want to replenish electrolytes. One of the things that I'll talk about in a minute is electrolytes and making sure we have balanced electrolytes. And so if you don't have balanced electrolytes, odds are you're going to be craving some salty foods. But this is a symptom of cortisol issues. If you have really high cravings for food, and especially salty foods, there might be something going on with the balance inside your body, and you might want to get checked for cortisol stuff then. And if you have low blood pressure, if you have actual low blood pressure, like if you're monitoring that and you see that it's low, that can be an issue. But with low blood sugar, oftentimes you'll have things like dizziness, fainting. Those are really common symptoms with low blood sugar. If you're having bouts of dizziness, if you're having bouts of feeling like you're going to faint or you are fainting, this can be issues with cortisol as well. So you definitely want to get those checked as well. And if you're dizzy and you're fainting all the time regardless, you should probably get checked anyway, but make sure you're also checking cortisol if you're getting anything else checked. But those are some more common symptoms that you might experience if you do have issues with cortisol. Now, what can you do? There's a few things that you can do, and again, this is going to be dependent on the person. As always, when I always recommend in my podcast episodes, things that you can do to help XYZ, I always say, it's really dependent on the person and what they're going through and their level of adrenal fatigue and cortisol issues. Also, there's 2 ways to test for cortisol issues, which actually I'll go over this first before I get into what you can do. So ways you can test for cortisol. Number 1, you can do serum cortisol, which is just a blood sample. So going into your regular LabCorp Quest, wherever you get blood drawn, there are serum cortisol levels that you can get checked, which for serum cortisol, what is most optimal? So remember too, and I've said this in previous podcast episodes, but there are certain things that doctors think is quote unquote normal with lab ranges, and functional medicine doctors, other practitioners look for optimal ranges. So the conventional range for your serum cortisol, if you get that tested, is anywhere from 7 to 28 in the morning. That's a pretty wide range, and 2 to 18 in the afternoon. But what I would want to see more, because that's a very wide range, so the more optimal ranges for your serum cortisol, if you're going to get that tested, is morning cortisol being anywhere from 10 to 15, and about 6 to 10 in the afternoon. So those are shorter ranges, those are more optimal ranges. So if you're getting serum cortisol checked, look for those optimal ranges. And then the second method that you can test for cortisol is called a 4-point cortisol test. This is a salivary test. You can do it at home on your own. But what this does is it basically takes that serum level to the next level. So our cortisol, as I've mentioned already earlier in this episode, it has the highest in the morning, and then it does drop off towards the afternoon. So we have a natural cortisol curve where it's high in the morning, kind of levels out and drops down by nighttime, so that we're getting ready for bed, our bodies are more relaxed, ready to get us to sleep. So a 4-point test shows your range at each point. So I think it's morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime. I think those are the 4 points that we test. And so for these, what's optimal here, if you're doing a 4-point test, is morning should be between about 3.7-ish to 9.5. The afternoon test should be around 1.2 to 3. Evening test should be 0.6 to 1.9-ish, and then nighttime between 0.4 and 1. So notice how it gets less throughout the day. So you can test either one of those ways. So that's what I want to say about testing for cortisol. Now back to what can you do. Keep in mind, again, this is going to depend on the person, and what I wanted to say and why I went back to testing was that somebody can have really low cortisol in the morning, some people can have really high cortisol throughout the day. It just depends. Your range is going to be different depending on the person, and so your 4-point won't look the same as everybody else's. So keep these things in mind when I'm talking about what you can do. Take it with a grain of salt. Not everything on this list should everybody immediately go and do. You should really work with a practitioner to find what's the best method for you to help heal your cortisol issues. But I'll go through a general list and give you tips on what you can do. So number 1 is wean from caffeine and alcohol. Obviously, caffeine as a stimulant, we want to not have any additional stimulants in the body. Same thing with alcohol, that can disrupt cortisol as well. So you want to wean from those and really have minimal of each. If you can totally drop off and not have any, that's even better, but really kind of minimal amounts of caffeine and alcohol. Number 2, don't go too low carb. Make sure that you are having moderate carbs. Again, blood sugar balance, overall general health as well, energy levels. Like, we need carbs in our diet for more than one reason, so just make sure you're not going too low carb. Number 3, add in electrolytes. I already kind of explained this a little bit, but the amount depends on the person, so don't just like overdose on electrolytes, but look for an electrolyte supplement. There are different brands that have different levels of electrolytes. So for example, I know Element or LMNT, that brand, I think their sodium in that is like 1,000 milligrams of sodium per one packet. It's like 1,000 or 1,100, which is crazy. It's a lot of sodium. You don't necessarily need that much sodium for your electrolytes, but there's that one. And then there's one that I take, it's from Coffee Over Cardio, and I believe the sodium in that is 400 milligrams of sodium, so a lot less sodium. So there are definitely ranges, and again, the dosage is going to be dependent on the person, so I can't give you the dose or what kind you should be taking, but you can add in an electrolyte supplement, which should help with cortisol issues. You can also, if you're not going to add in electrolytes, make sure that you are salting your food. And also, even if you are adding in electrolytes, depending on the brand, like if you're having a brand that has 1,100 milligrams of sodium in the electrolyte packet, you're good. But you can also add salted foods. That again helps with electrolyte balance. You also want to make sure that you're having a good amount of healthy fats in your diet, anywhere from, I would say, about 60 grams or over. You don't need to go too high, like 90, 95, 100 grams of fat, but try minimum to have at least 60 grams of fat in your diet. Healthy fats, olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, those being like your biggest ones there. But this can help with cortisol as well. You can also try adding in a vitamin C supplement and other vitamins and minerals. Obviously, nutrients are very, very important. Vitamins and minerals in general are very, very important, but can help balance out. So a vitamin C is a good one to add in, and also depends, other vitamins, minerals, again, can't necessarily say which one's for you specifically. If you have questions on that, let me know. Another big one is nervous system regulation. So as I mentioned, one of the biggest causes of cortisol issues is high chronic stress. So you'll want to work on nervous system regulation. And so within this, you can practice different techniques to get us into the rest and digest mode or parasympathetic nervous system mode. So things like breathing techniques, so breath work, yoga, meditation is a great one. Really calming techniques that get our body into rest and digest. So make sure that you are working on that. That should be like a daily thing. If you have cortisol issues, you should really, really nail down nervous system regulation and stress management. It's a huge, huge, huge one to focus on. You'll also want to lower your training intensity for a little bit of time, at least until you are like fully healed and good to go. But high intensity training is a stressor on the body. We're trying to lower stress as much as possible. So lower your training intensity. That includes frequency, volume, the like kind of weight that you're using. Try not to do any HIIT-based workouts, so any like HIIT classes or things that like you're jumping around all the time. Focus mainly on resistance training with low weights, something that's a little bit challenging, but more like moderate, low to moderate intensity rather than like pushing really heavy, and also low intensity cardio like walks, something that's very easy, doesn't require a lot of recovery time. So you might need to lower your training intensity for a bit of time. And then we can talk about supplements. So again, with supplements, this is going to be dependent on the person, but some that I would recommend for general population is a fish oil. Fish oil has definitely been shown to help with cortisol, so you have to make sure that there's a good balance between the EPA and DHA that you're taking, but in general, try to have like about 4,000 milligrams of a fish oil every single day. Another one is a good multivitamin. I like the Metagenics high quality multivitamin. Is good for more than one reason, but it can help with cortisol levels as well. Another general one is vitamin D. Again, the dose depends on the person. So general dosage, I think, is roughly about 5,000 IU for like a regular supplement. Some people might need more than that depending on how severe the cortisol issues are. But again, depends on the person. If you have questions about that, let me know. You should be taking a vitamin D with a K2. Some vitamin D supplements have K2 in it. If it does not, I would suggest having both supplements because they work hand in hand together for absorption purposes. Another one that general population could use is a magnesium glycinate. That one's a great one. It's a bit of a calming one. Roughly 300 milligrams a day should be fine for you. Another calming supplement is ashwagandha. That's a great one to add in. And then there's other things like an adrenal glandular you can have cortisol support supplements. But again, that's going to be more dependent on the person and their specific needs. So supplements, I laid out some of the more general ones. And then of course, depending on the person, you might need more or different kinds of supplements as well. And I quickly want to talk about my client, Kim, for a second. So recently I had a client who has been struggling with the fatigue. The fatigue was the first kind of red flag that we noticed. And then she had other symptoms as well. And so we did test her cortisol. She went through a really stressful period at the beginning of the year and we did test her cortisol. Turns out her cortisol was indeed tanked. So she had very, very low levels of cortisol, and so we did put her on a protocol. So I gave her a few things to work on. So just kind of like highlighting for her what we're working on too is adopting more of that high-fat diet. So we're definitely changing up macro splits a little bit to help with the fat distribution. We're also working on liver detox for just overall liver support and overall health. And then we are also working on some supplements as well. Again, dependent on the person. I won't go through like every single thing that she's having, but she's definitely doing more of the general ones that I had mentioned. Like she's taking a vitamin D, she's taking a fish oil, she's taking a vitamin B complex. She does have an electrolyte mix added in as well. She's taking magnesium glycinate and she's taking a few others, but it's really cool to kind of help somebody through this. Right now, she has been for the last like two plus weeks now at this point, have been saying like her energy is so much better already. And we kind of just started this a few weeks ago, like 4 weeks ago. She's already feeling so much better, like less inflamed, more motivated, more energy. She's not taking naps throughout the day. She's like, I have energy to do my chores and work and take care of, she does have a son. So, you know, it's really fun to kind of see changes happening with people that need it. But I will update her results when, you know, we obviously have to give it some time for those to change, but I'm really excited for her. But yeah, that's just like an example of when you need cortisol testing and how to do things correctly. But hopefully this helped. Again, remember, we do need cortisol to a certain degree. It's when it's super low or high that's an issue. But check in, see if you have any of these symptoms. If you're chronically experiencing these symptoms, if you have questions, if you don't know if these symptoms are aligning with cortisol issue or not, let me know. I did give you quite a few things that you can work on. Really the main thing that would be dependent on the person is the supplements, so be careful with those. It's going to be dependent on the person, but I try to give more general ones that general population can use. But hopefully if you are feeling any of these symptoms, if you do have cortisol issues, you can use some of the things that I suggested here and work on those yourself. But again, I would suggest working with a practitioner if you do have really elevated or really low cortisol levels, because they will probably be able to help you more than you can help yourself. But that is really it for this episode. If you have questions on cortisol for yourself or somebody else in general, let me know, and I'll see you guys at the next episode.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Health Club with Julia podcast. If you love the episode, share the podcast and tag me, and subscribe so you don't miss any further episodes. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM. Thanks for being a part of the club. See you next time.